Imagine that every idea and thought ever thought or imagined is located in the imagination space of no location. It is not assigned to any single being or function. It is there for those who wish to access it. In the imagination place, imagine that every thought and every idea that you can imagine becomes the experience that you have. Imagine. Imagine the things you can do while you play there. Imagine the fun you can have. Imagine that you wish to access and play in this imagination. Imagination is free. It has no attachments to anything unlike itself. Imagine that you wish to play there. Imagine that you are free to play there. Find yourself in a comfortable position, warm and safe, one that will allow your body to remain still. Your body requires nothing of you but your conscious breath. Now close your eyes. Breathe circular breaths without forcing the air in and out of your body. Become aware of the breath as it enters and leaves your body. Become aware of your body while breathing in and out. Become aware of the warmth surrounding your body as you breathe. Now, imagine here where your body breathes that you close your eyes again, becoming aware of the dark silence behind your eyelids, focusing on nothing but the breath. Become aware of your forehead. Imagine a warm glow emanating from the middle of your forehead. Continue breathing while you become aware of the glow in the middle of your forehead. Imagine that as you become aware of the glow in your forehead, you find a feeling of graceful peace and spacious beauty completely surrounding you. Imagine that this feeling of beauty has no beginning and no end. Imagine that you become acquainted with this beauty as you breathe, aware of the glow in your forehead and aware of the breath. Breathe round as you begin to wear this welcoming feeling with no destination and no hurry to leave this space. Imagine that it feels like home. Imagine that your body begins to feel sensations of warmth and senses the smell of spring in a garden sanctuary. Imagine. because you can. The scent of tiny new growing things as they break apart the earth for their tiny new bodies. Imagine the song of a tiny breeze as it tickles the leaves and rustles the grass of your garden sanctuary. Imagine that you feel most welcome here. You are safe here. Breathe in and out in circular breaths as you prepare for your journey. Imagine that you are walking barefoot on a stone pathway. In your imagined place, you imagine them to be smooth, flat stones, paced slightly inches apart, with little white rocks and tiny green plants growing between them. Imagine that you become aware of walking on this quiet path, aware of nothing but the sensations of the movement of your feet. Imagine as you breathe that you are looking down at your feet as they step comfortably along. And you imagine that you see water moving in the white rocks where the plants grow. You keep walking, watching your feet and breathing. And you begin to notice that each movement of your foot gives off light to the objects below it. Imagine that each movement illuminates what it touches and where it was, and everything in between with faint blue light. Imagine that you watch this play of energy for a moment as you walk and breathe. You imagine as you walk further down this path, with each step that you watch, the light grows and soon begins to light all that is around it in bold, brightly colored spectrums of light. With each step, you bring this light into the surroundings. Imagine that you continue to breathe and walk slowly, watching the play of colors from your movements upon the surrounding energy. Imagine that you have become aware of this play of energy, and you are now seeing the lighted area surrounding your feet. Imagine that you see the water between the rocks become shiny, silvery, and golden strands of movement, as though it were gold and silver shards of liquid glass. Imagine that you see tiny plants under your feet, sending their own energy out to greet you. Imagine that you have become aware of feeling happy and a bit curious without any anticipation. Imagine that you watch this display of movement as you walk along until you begin to imagine that before you is a circular area of soft, beckoning flowers and a slender fountain so tall that you can barely see the top. Imagine that you stop before the circle and notice that the flowers are emitting sweet, soft, inviting sounds with their own inner lights. Imagine that you breathe deep as you step into the circle of plants and breathe while you watch the silvery and golden strands of falling water puddle into a magnificent bowl of silvery blue and golden glassy light with bubbles of changing colored light. Imagine that you breathe deeply and notice the smell of freshness, the bright smell of ease and happiness that enters you through your nostrils and seeps into the center of your mind. Imagine that as you reach out your hand to touch the glassy pool of water, you become aware that your hand glows with the same light as the water. Imagine that as you dip your fingers into the bowl of living water, your energy melds with the energy of the water. Imagine that you see your hand lighted with this energy, still formed as your hand and visible to you. As you become aware of the feeling of welcome from this water, imagine that you flick your fingers in the pool and watch as droplets and bubbles from this water become multicolored points of energy, each with their own song for you. Imagine that you can feel their song of love for you within your heart. Imagine that while you are playing with the energies around you and smelling the freshness and breathing in all of this loving energy with your mind, your heart center begins to emit a soft, pink, warming glow. Imagine that as you breathe in this loving energy, your heart center begins to grow so brightly that its energy escapes the cage within your chest. Imagine that you look down at your chest to see the warm pink energy emerging out of your body into the space surrounding you. Imagine that you watch that welcomed light as it fills the air around you, touching everything and sending warmth and appreciation back into your heart. Imagine that you stand and breathe into your nostrils that wonderful sensation of light. Imagine that you stand still and breathe it all the way into your centers. You notice that as you breathe in this life and love, your fingertips begin to warm. Imagine that you look to see them emitting the same sparkling light as in the water. Imagine that the movements of your fingers create a soft, warm glow in front of you, lighting up the entire circle of flowers surrounding the flowing water. Each movement of your fingers brightens the area around you. Imagine that you raise your arms and send your light into the heavens. Imagine that you begin to feel complete as you stand in the light of that golden flowing wall of glassy water. Imagine that you are becoming aware of looking around inside the circular garden. Imagine that you begin to notice a light behind the fountain. Faint at first, and as you look, it grows into a beautiful, beckoning brightness of colors and sounds so welcoming that they call you toward it. You are pulled by your own intention. Imagine that as you move toward the beautiful light inside the circle, that you are seeking only entrance into this beautiful vision before you, with no forethought of its structure. Imagine that this beautiful animated light of energy beckons you forward into itself. Imagine that you feel an overwhelming sense of completeness emanating from that light. Imagine that you lack nothing, for all is here Imagine that as you breathe, each breath pulls you closer to the vision of light. Imagine that as you draw nearer to the brightness, you see that the vision consists of two lights connected together in a beautiful display of color. Your forward momentum brings you in direct line with those connected lights. Imagine that you begin to send two lines of light running from your glowing heart center toward each of those visions of light, and you watch as those lines connect, imagining that your heart and mind are complete. Imagine that you are becoming that energy. Imagine, and you can, that as you connect to these streams of light, the light around the connection becomes a place of your greatest happiness, of home. Imagine that you are complete and happy to your fullest capabilities. Imagine that you stand in this happiness and breathe deeply, filling your entire being with lighted energy. Breathe while you begin to notice that you have lighted everything around you in your presence. Imagine that you feel right at home in these energies. Imagine that you have no desire or inclination to leave this energy. Imagine that you become aware of the sensations of your body as you stand in your own creation of light. You become aware that you sense vibration from this creation in your own body. Imagine that your body begins to spin and dance in this energy, leaving colored streams of light in the wake of your movements. Imagine that you close your eyes while you twirl around with your arms outstretched, and you can see behind your eyelids the beautiful swirls of colored light that are of your own creation. Imagine that as you play here, you breathe deeply of the life-giving energy surrounding you. Imagine as you become aware in your gleeful play in this energy that there is no hurry here. All is as it should be. Imagine that your only choice is to play or not to play. Imagine that you choose to play in this beautiful energy. Imagine that you open your eyes. Imagine that as your eyes begin to focus into this loving energy, you glimpse a living, animated tree just off to your right, and as you turn toward it, you breathe deeply while you become lost in the colors and lights of that tree. Imagine that each leaf has a color of light inside, changing, ever changing, each leaf singing a magnificent, intricately multiple song. As you breathe in the life-giving energy of that tree, imagine that you walk over and sit upon the trunk of this magnificent tree, thinking only of the energy you take in from it. Imagine that you breathe deeply, sitting on that welcoming tree, becoming aware of the energy of the tree as it wraps itself around you. Imagine now that you have begun to feel so welcome here, that you have no awareness of anything else around you as you sit and breathe. Imagine that as you sit and breathe in the living energies of this tree of life, you begin to become aware of something other than yourself. Imagine that in front of you is a feast prepared especially for your palate. Imagine that all around this feast table are other beings just as yourself, beings of light energy connected to the dual-lighted gate. You know each one, and each one knows you. Imagine what a party. Imagine that you tarry here with no thought of what lies beyond. Imagine that.